Is absolute Batman actually Batman? I'm determined to give it a chance. I want to like it. I want to love it, mainly because the art is so good. Say what you will about the logo, but remember, this version of Bruce Wayne is not a billionaire. He can't afford to hire some big name branding agency to handle his graphic design. Maybe that's the best he could do. Maybe he had to draw it with crayons on a napkin. Still, I've been reading and watching and listening to a bunch of different stuff about it, and it got me thinking, when does Batman stop being Batman? And I know that sounds a little bit like a clue that the Riddler might drop at the front gate of Wayne Manor, but bear with me. And I will go ahead and admit, yes, I'm overthinking this. I'm sorry. So writers are always changing up our favorite characters. We're used to it. And sometimes we like it. Sometimes we like the changes so much they get baked into the character. Like Batman and Superman's no killing rule. They used to kill people. Batman's no gun rule. Batman used to have a gun. And Superman, if you think he's powerful now, he used to have no weaknesses. Then eventually Kryptonite came into play, and later his vulnerability to magic. Wolverine's claws weren't always a part of his skeleton. Thor wasn't always a god. He used to be some guy named Donald Blake with the powers of Thor. So yeah, sometimes they're good changes. They add to the character. But other times they make us puke. Like the X-Men Origins Wolverine version of Deadpool. Now to be fair, as I mentioned in another video, Absolute Batman, it's not meant to be canon. It's not part of the main continuity. Scott Snyder himself said it's not a reboot, it's not a retcon, nothing like that. It's a what if Batman story. What if Bruce Wayne wasn't a billionaire? Or at least that would be the most interesting formulation. We'll get more into that in a little bit. So as I'm hearing about these changes that they're going to make to Absolute Batman, it got me thinking, what does it mean to be Batman? More specifically, what does it mean to be Bruce Wayne and Bruce Wayne's Batman? Not the Jason Todd Batman or the Jim Gordon or Thomas Wayne or Alfred Batman. Tons of characters have taken the Batsuit out for a spin. But obviously, when we think Batman, we're thinking Bruce Wayne. And when it comes to that iconic main character, what are his essential attributes? Some of the characteristics that I can think of are no powers, no parents, well prepared, well equipped. In a way, it's maybe helpful to think of him in terms of another character who he's not. He's basically the antithesis of the Punisher. Bruce Wayne was a kid who lost his parents, which then motivated him, and that trauma drives him to use fear to bring criminals to justice and to keep anybody else from having to suffer from that pain. Frank Castle was a parent who lost his wife and kids. He channels his rage into punishing criminals himself. So both of these guys are vigilantes without superpowers, but their trauma affects them in different ways, and it's different trauma. You know, losing your parents is different than losing your wife and losing your kids. I think that even if you don't have kids, you could probably imagine you'd be pissed off in a different way than if somebody killed your parents. Either way, you'd be upset. But as a kid, that makes you sad. That makes you scared. And so it's going to lead you to want to maybe protect other people from being scared. You're going to have a little bit more of an innocent point of view. You're not going to be thinking, I'm going to go kill everybody. But if somebody kills your kids and your wife, the people you're responsible for, and it's because they're trying to get at you, then yeah, you're going to be mad in a different way. And that's going to affect the way you fight crime. So that's where I think this version of Batman, this absolute Batman, may miss the mark. The main changes, aside from the superficial ones, are that now he's working class and he's not an orphan. In this version, Bruce Wayne grows up in Crime Alley. He's the son of working class parents. And he does suffer a trauma, but it's not one that leaves him an orphan. Now, does Bruce Wayne being working class matter? I don't think so. In fact, in some ways, I almost feel like it strips away an extraneous attribute, something that we don't really need. Being a billionaire gets in the way of understanding who Batman really is. Because, you know, lots of people are working class. Most people aren't billionaires. So you're adding something that I don't think really needs to be added. What does him being a billionaire tell us about him, or the kind of trauma that drives him, or his ideas about justice? But it's the trauma of losing his parents that makes him want to fight crime in the first place. And I know somewhere Bruce Wayne's listening to this thinking, this guy wants my parents to die? I don't. But if you take away Bruce Wayne's billionaire status, you get a Batman who has to be more creative in the way that he fights crime. He has to be more innovative in how he equips himself and maybe has to prepare a little more or in different ways to be ready for whatever may come. But if you take away the fact that Bruce Wayne is an orphan, then there wouldn't be any Batman. Bruce Wayne would grow up and be a doctor or an attorney, or maybe he'd buy Twitter. I don't know. But he wouldn't be fighting crime. So what would Batman be like if Bruce Wayne wasn't a billionaire? Interesting question. What would Batman be like if Bruce Wayne wasn't an orphan? Well, he wouldn't be Batman. Not an interesting question. But changing Bruce Wayne's socioeconomic status is not the only thing that Snyder is doing. In addition to that, this Bruce Wayne is a monkey wrench, according to Snyder. This version of Batman is an agent of chaos. But does that really align with Batman's core ethos? Batman operates outside of the law to restore order and justice. Even in this universe powered by so-called dark side energy, even in a dystopia, which this version of Gotham may be, my concern would be, does this chaotic element added in with these other changes dilute the character to the point where it's not really Batman anymore? There's a guideline for science fiction writers that I think is applicable. The idea is that you only want to have one big lie. A story should have one major unrealistic or speculative sci-fi element, and then the rest of it should be grounded in realism. That makes it easier for the audience to suspend their disbelief, and it makes it easier for the writer to really focus on the implications of the central concept, whatever the change may be. And even though this isn't quite the same because Batman is a fictional character, it seems to me that the way to really find out something interesting about the character would be, let's change one thing and see what effect would that have. It's one thing to say, okay, well, this Batman, he's not a billionaire, so he doesn't learn martial arts, so he doesn't have all the best weapons. Those are all things that come from the fact that he's not a billionaire. But anybody's parents can get shot. In fact, you're probably more likely to lose your parents if you're not rich. And I don't really see what the point was of removing that element, unless there's some other story he's trying to tell, and the only way he could figure out how to put the pieces together was he needed Thomas Wayne to be a teacher and Martha Wayne to work for Mayor Gordon. It's kind of like having a science experiment. You don't want to change too many variables. You want to change one variable, compare it to a control, and see, okay, what's different? What effect does this have? So to really see what makes Bruce Wayne tick, I think it would have been a lot smarter to just say, he's not a billionaire. Where do we go from there? And I would have left everything else the same. The best part about that is, like I said earlier, I love the idea of Batman not being a billionaire. I'm still not quite able to put my finger on what it is, but there's just something about him being a billionaire that seems so unnecessary. And I think back in the day when all these superheroes were being developed, this idea that somebody would be a playboy by day and a vigilante by night maybe had some romantic charm to it, but I don't care about that. And I don't know that anybody really cares about that these days. So get rid of that. And then get to the point where it's like, okay, this guy, not only is he an orphan, but he's an orphan in a really tough situation because he didn't inherit a mansion. He doesn't have a butler who's paid to take care of him for the rest of his life. Instead, Snyder has changed a lot of things. And my question is, has he changed too much? I don't know. It could be, and I hope that it is, that when I read it, he's figured out some ways to do this that really make a lot of sense. I don't think there's anybody, regardless of what they think about the logo, who would say that Scott Snyder is not a great Batman writer, and a great writer in general. But if the character has been changed too much, it may still be a great story, but it's not going to tell us much about Batman. Still, I'm holding out hope that Snyder's going to figure out a way to make it work. The art is amazing. Everything that keeps popping up around the internet is just beautiful. So I'm really hoping it's going to work on some level. And the nice thing about comic books and any kind of fiction, sci-fi, action movies, any of it, is that it is fiction. Whatever they do, it's not going to hurt the real Batman. He'll still be there for us. And what I always like to do, if a story isn't the way that I feel like it should be, there's this guy, Stanley Fish, who I think he's the guy who talked about death of the author or whatever, something like that, where once the author writes it, they don't get to tell you anything about it. You get to interpret it however you want. And I really take that to the extreme. If they've written some stuff and it doesn't end the way I want, or something happens that I didn't want it to happen, man, I'll just interpret the hell out of it. I'll make it mean whatever I want it to mean. So what do you think? Is Absolute Batman still Batman, or is he some other character entirely? Where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line?